everyone, and welcome back to another live stream with me, Grizzly. This is Grizzly True Crime, and today, for the second time today, we continue to talk about the Ruby Franke case and Jodi Hildebrandt, as well as many other maybe similar alleged cults, like Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow. It should be Lori Daybell, really. Someone said the other day it should be Lori Daybell and not Vallow. It's an insult to the Vallow name, right? We're also going to talk about the Zion Society cult and things like that with a cult expert. Special guest today, Mike King. I'll bring him up in a moment. Please like and share so that others can find this stream as well, because I'm sure we're going to learn lots of interesting information. And if you didn't see the premiere that I just had before, earlier today, before this live stream, oh man, we finally made it through Ruby Franke's journal, and it was just horrendous. So thank you if you did watch that. I really appreciate it. Okay, so now bringing up special guest. You might know him already from Profiling Evil, and he's been on the show before. Mike King, welcome.
Oh, hey, Gazelle, thank you. It's so good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here again with us and the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies loved having you on last time as well, discussing all these alleged cults,
Oh, that was a blast. And I'll tell you what, you're just knocking it out of the park. I really love how you're doing some of the deep dives too. I never seem to really dig into those and go through them where people can really respond. So I just love watching that when you do it.
Thank you so much. And I know last time as well, the Grizzly said they love your channel. If you guys don't know the channel yet, it's called Profiling Evil. Let me show you quickly. Go subscribe over there. Nightbot will be sharing the links throughout the stream. And let's all go and raid. We do Grizzly raids sometimes. We're going to raid Mike's stream for tomorrow. Click notify me. I already clicked it, as you can see. Notification is on. I will share the link later in the stream. Okay, so we'll all be there tomorrow chatting in your chat. You're doing that. And hopefully everyone goes to subscribe over there if you don't know who Mike is yet. Okay, so
Well,
if they don't know you, do you have like a short intro of what? I know that most people say, Mike King, cult expert. Can you tell us why that's your reputation?
I spent 28 years in law enforcement in a sworn capacity. I retired as a chief. During that time, I was trained as a profiler by FBI agents and spent much of my career looking at ritual crimes and serial murder cases. So I don't know, that's really a marketable skill to come out of a job and go out into the world and try to find a job saying, I've interviewed about every serial killer on the planet, but that's kind of what I did. And then for the last 20 years, I've been working with law enforcement around the globe on intelligence, real-time crime, analytics, fusion, things like that. So anyway, I'm old, and a couple of years ago, my kids said, we're tired of listening to your stories about the old cop days. So why don't you put one on YouTube? And for some reason, it resonated. So I'm still doing it.
It's working out, and we love it. It's so nice to hear all your insight and wisdom. And man, we're going to pick your brain today. So Grizzlies, if you have questions, please do ask it throughout the chat. There's a couple of cases we want to talk about. Okay, let's start with Jodi Hildebrandt.
Oh man, has that been a mess or what?
What a mess that makes us all really angry. Why do these alleged cults project so much onto children? Why? Why do they do that?
It really troubles me because, number one, the cult leaders are so good at figuring out people who are at a vulnerable state, whether it's an emotional vulnerable state or a financial vulnerable state, and they are able to kind of mingle with the faith tradition, their philosophies, and somehow people buy off on it. And I think primarily from my perspective, it's just like when we're watching either CNN or Fox News, you see people kind of following the news channel that has the same ideology or feeling or frustration that they have. And when they find someone like that and they start to align with them, then they invest everything. And once you've invested, it's really hard to say, holy cow, I made a mistake.
Oh man, that is so true. Finding vulnerable people. And in this case, I think that Jodi Hildebrandt did just that. And she basically infiltrated a family. I mean, mom, dad, 6 kids, and the next minute she's moving in because she's in a mental health crisis. So now she's the victim. She's moving in. she's then sleeping in the bed. The husband's on the couch. Then he's out the door. My goodness, Jodi Hildebrandt is, I mean, and then to think how she brainwashed, it seems like, Ruby Franke. And she had these visions, which ironically, she also was inspired by Chad Daybell's visions of glory. Isn't that so dangerous?
You know, this narcissistic personality that gets involved in these kinds of things, I've looked at some of these cult leaders and I've wondered how many of them are on the threshold of actually being schizophrenic. And when you look at some of these people, you see like Lori Vallow Daybell, if you look back into her family history, you see that she had a father who had schizophrenia. And that I take from a public record that said in court when her sister was going through custody battles, her husband said, she's got mental health issues just like her father had, and he called out schizophrenia. And you know, you think about these people that say, hey, God's speaking to me and I'm really special above everybody else, and you wonder how many of them are borderline schizophrenic. And that's just a guy who works the street with no degree in psychology that's coming up with that, although my master's degree is in criminal behavior. So
Okay, well, I suppose they say they're hearing directly from God. And there's a quote that I think you're going to say it best. I was recently watching a show of yours that you did with a guy who I think his name was Adam. But you say, why do people find cults appealing, right? Or they don't know that they're not like, sign me up to a cult, right? It's because, and you said, correct me now, because it's something like they can have something that others don't have and feel better than everybody else, right?
yeah, and so when you're talking about Hildebrandt and Frankie and the culture that is in Utah with the Latter-day Saint mainstream faith, you have this terminology that they used. I remember I ran the ritual crime task force for the Attorney General, and so I spent much of my time looking at the different closed societies across the state, and they have terminology that says additional light and knowledge, and everyone kind of yearns for that. And who doesn't want to be closer to whoever your God is? Who doesn't want to try to project themselves in a more godlike or Christ-like or Buddhist-like format? And so you see those things, and the challenge that I see is that we then, looking from the outside in, want to say, well, if that wacky person's saying that, everyone from that faith tradition must be saying that. And that's a terribly dangerous position for us to take, because it's not the truth between mainstream religions that are open and transparent versus these closed societies like we see happening in this, even in this tiny cult that that Jodi Hildebrandt was building.
Right. And what is, I keep thinking of, you've said a phrase before. Is it like, it's fringe is the first word. What is the second word? It's like they start off like these did. Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, Jodi Hildebrandt, all of these started in the LDS church, but then they branch off to something called fringe. Is it like a fringe religion, belief, their own thing? How do they do that? Like, how do they just decide we're part of this whole community, now we're going to go that way?
You know, it's interesting. Utah has a huge Latter-day Saint population from the mainstream church, and that's to be separated from like the fundamental LDS group, Warren Jeffs and the polygamists and others who were excommunicated, removed from church rolls, but continued to do things the way that they thought God wanted them to. But when we were investigating crimes, being in a predominantly LDS state, we had to sit back at times and say, holy cow, many of the victims are Latter-day Saint. Many of the predators are Latter-day Saint. Is this a Latter-day Saint issue? And I remember sitting down in a conference with a cult investigator in Chicago, and we were talking about this, and he brought it up from his perspective with a very high volume of Catholic faith tradition people in Chicago. He said, let me tell you what, every one of these people I'm dealing with are Catholics. And I'm wondering if it's the Catholic Church. And a kid from the South said, no, I'm wondering if it's the Baptists that are doing it. And what I finally came to this realization of is that these faith traditions are the core value system that kids everywhere get. But when these predators go out and they start to twist religion and make it their own, they're going to rely on the way they learned to pray as a child, or they're going to rely on a piece of scripture that they heard from whatever their canon of scripture is. And they're going to use that to gain control and to show this elevated position of spirituality or whatever else. And so one of the things I would caution all of us to do, and something that I learned very young as an investigator in cult behaviors, is quit thinking, oh, this is a Latter-day Saint issue, or this is a Catholic issue, or this is a bunch of wacky Buddhists. No, it is a predator who's using something to get what he wants or she wants. And that something is usually taking something familiar and twisting it to fit their own carnal needs.
Carnal needs, exactly. Because I'm like, what are they, like Jodi Hildebrandt? What is the end goal? I mean, she was supposedly having visions and going to share this with the world, so it's a whole ego trip for her, I guess. But it seems like she was after Ruby Franke's money too, because she's like, hand me over your entire YouTube channel, like all the assets you have, just sign everything over to me. So carnal needs, everything else, financial need, all being met, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because you try to identify what is the motivation behind this. And I remember as a young investigator, and I was dealing with a lot of serial killers at the time, and it boiled down in my little world that I was working within, that all I needed to do is think about sex, money, or drugs. And one of those three would be the pillar of power and control. Well, when I started looking at predatory, repetitive behaviors, cult behaviors, I had to bring in that idea that no, the power and control comes from that power and control that they have over people, that their will becomes the will of people who want to follow them. And I think that is more intoxicating than money or drugs or even sex.
Right, even though those things are probably all part of it, like Jodi Hildebrandt. I don't know. It seems like she had a bit of a crush on Ruby Franke there. Especially reading those journals, I'm like, what is going on here? You know, the kids have to stay in the basement and the kids have to this. So what are they up to with these interventions and prescription drugs they bought in Mexico? What is going on? It's like, I think Jodi Hildebrandt ticked all the boxes there. So
Yeah, that's been really interesting to look at, that personal relationship that's going on, the therapeutic relationship that may have been the starting point. But again, what was it that drew Frankie to Hildebrandt? And then what causes what you would hope would be a seemingly intelligent husband who says,
yes.
I'm starting to lose control, but hey, I'm going to go ahead and go with it. I'll let her sleep in my room and I'll sleep in the back room and I'll move out of my house and I'll quit having contact with my children for a year in hopes that I can somehow get back together. That's showing that there's some real disconnects on what is right and what is wrong.
And do you think that Jodi Hildebrandt already had an alleged cult or was starting to form something very dangerous?
You know, that's really the interesting question I always keep going back to is this a budding cult leader, or is it someone who's already established and they've got some tried and true principles? So I guess it would have to go back to what the trial balloons are. And I call them trial balloons because if you think back in economics or other things, in the old days, they used to send up a balloon to see what way the wind was blowing. And the same thing happens in these predatory positions. They're going to test drive some ideas and see how it floats. And if people are repelling it, then they think, oh man, I got to go back and fix this or change my delivery a little bit. And they continue to work on that and get better and better at it, just like all of us do. I mean, you think about a teenage boy or girl going through this process of starting to link up with other kids their age. They are clumsy and they slowly start to develop a system that works. And when we're adults, we do that same thing in business. And people who are in sales are incredibly manipulative and good at what they do but they either do it in a legitimate way or an illegitimate way. And these predators are exactly the same. They figure out the best way to approach. And I remember being taught at the FBI Academy that there was a saying that said, "He who is good with a hammer thinks everything is a nail." And the idea was that what worked really well yesterday with this particular person isn't necessarily going to work with this person today. And so the cult leader becomes really good at being good on their feet.
Seems so. It seems like Jodi Hildebrand's go-to was shaming people, because that's a very powerful thing as well. To chip away at someone's self-worth is to access that shame. So I think that's also what she did to Ruby Franke's husband, because she's like, you have an addiction and you need to get out of here and all of that. And I'm sure he felt pretty ashamed. She did it to other victims as well who've come forward. That's another way to worm your way in. My goodness.
Yeah, and and everything was also kind of in secret, which always troubles me because legitimate forms of therapy are not done in secret. Legitimate processes, legitimate religions, legitimate business dealings are not done in secrecy. You're not the special person that's going to get the special deal and be somehow following all of the rules. And yet we are so gullible for getting a little more than somebody else.
Right. So I think that this is a good time to show your book, because I don't know if everybody knows that you wrote this book called Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. Like, you know a lot about this. So can you tell us a little bit about this book? And then I'm going to ask you, how did you start this investigation and what did you find?
Well, I'll tell you why I wrote the book. When you go through an investigation like this, it literally takes every fiber of your life. And in this particular case, the Zion Society took 2.5 years of my life, working just incredibly long days. In the initial stages of the case, we were working 20-hour days for over a month just to put together the case so that we could serve the search warrants and try to rescue these children that we believed were being abused in the cult. But once we got through the trial process, I said, enough's enough. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I'll tell you what, people think that looking into the seedy side of life is a little bit intriguing or captivating. It is absolutely a big old black bucket of sorrow and sadness from my perspective. And you can only take so much of it until you say enough is enough. And I did. And so for 30 years, Gazella, I just got rid of it. I said no more. And I thought the children don't want to see me because I'm a reminder of what they endured. And so I basically just went and put everything into a box in my closet and never looked at it again. And in fact, about 30 years later, I gave it to an FBI buddy of mine who was a profiler, and I gave him the entire box with all my audio tapes and videotapes of the crime scene. And I said, you might want to do something with this, because he was still teaching profiling around the world. I said, but I don't want anything to do with it. He thought I had cancer and was going to die because cops just don't give up their files. And about a week later, I got an email from a young woman who said, you may not remember me, but I was a child in the Zion Society case, and I'm having these terrible memories, and I'm wondering if you would talk to me. And I thought about it for almost a week, and I finally sent her back an email, and I did remember her very well. And I said, hey, Amber, I'm not willing to talk to you. It just wouldn't prove anything. I'm retired now. If you need help, you should see a therapist. And she accepted it, but I could tell she was disappointed. Within hours of sending that note, I received a second email from another victim in the same cult. These are now 45-year-old women. And she said, I'm having these terrible memories, and I wondered if you might talk to me. And I remember this child vividly as we put her inside of a child protective services van and drove her away from the scene. And she gave me this death stare. I could tell she just hated my guts because I was ripping her from her parents and everything she knew, even though she was being abused. Well, I decided these kids deserve to have somebody tell their story. And so I got them onto a phone call together. And initially, there were 8 of the 32 children that joined. And it was like listening to a batch of sailors talking. I mean, they went through their experiences in there and they were validating each other. These kids hadn't seen each other in 30 years. And at the end of that, they said, we need you to tell our story. And that's kind of what launched doing Deceived, and why I did it was because the kids asked for it.
Okay, and what are you currently working on now? Because I believe you're still hard at work uncovering things to do with the Zion Society cult, right?
Yeah, so one of the lessons that we learned, and this has now been almost 3 years ago that we brought the kids together, we learned that we failed them terribly in 3 areas. One was that we sent these kids back to the same homes, we being the courts, not me. We were very much against it. But they were returned back to their parents who were cult members in the same cult, allowing their children to be abused, and sent them back with an order to get counseling as part of this criminal system. And we put 12 people in prison as a result of this case. I mean, I think we had about a little more than 4,000 rapes of children in the case. The kids later on, Dr. Phil with me said, no, double it and you might be closer to the number. But they endured just horrible abuses by this cult, which was rather large. And so we failed them by putting them back with parents that were allowing them to not get counseling and telling them everything's a lie. And if you've got bad feelings, get over it. And that was kind of the way each of the kids were treated. The second thing that we failed at was these kids had a 3rd grade education, and it was homeschool education. And so when they tried to matriculate into the regular public school system, they were still wearing goofy prairie dress type clothing. They were wearing clothes that they wore in the cult. They acted like they did in the cult. And they were just terrorized in school. And so every one of them dropped out of school and had a difficult time throughout their life, working part-time jobs, working hourly wage jobs. One was a stripper. They just did all kinds of things trying to make ends meet. We failed them because we didn't have a plan in place from that perspective. And then the third was not only did we send them into the community, but we didn't have a way for them to get counseling later in life. And so I got a hold of the county attorney that helped me prosecute this case. We went to the governor and we got approval to have Utah Victims Reparations pay for all of their counseling now as 45-year-old women. So finally, they had a methodology to start paying for counseling. That was really a win for us. We went to the university, and Weber State University's president, he agreed that whether they wanted a GED or a PhD, that the university would help them get an education. And they're now getting opportunities to go to school and get an education. And I'll just proudly say that little girl that was in the van that gave me the dirty look, her name is Andrea. And in another 4 weeks, Andrea will be graduating from Cal State with a master's degree. I've already paid to get her airfare over there, and we'll be there for her graduation. We've become her surrogate parents over the years, and so we're seeing her get this wonderful degree and make some wonderful movement. But the kids, they've conquered, they won, but they've had terribly disruptive lives because of the abuse that they endured.
I can only imagine, and it's nice to hear, because you are keeping in touch with these victims, that their lives can improve, that they can overcome this, because it must be incredibly difficult. We've just been reading Ruby Franke's journal and the abuse that they inflicted on her 2 youngest children, and that's all we know of so far. Her and Jodi Hildebrandt, and it seems like Jodi Hildebrandt's orders. It was her type of thinking, her brainwashing, her everything, and they seem to really believe it, which is also shocking to me. That these people that abuse children really believe they should. It's unbelievable. But to hear that they
Yeah.
can recover is good.
And I wonder also, you think about a domestic violence cycle, for instance, and how an individual will continue to return to the abuser, whether it's because they think they can fix it, or there's a mental thing that happens up here when we invest everything. It's really difficult to step up and say, I was an idiot. I was believing the wrong thing, and this was wrong, and I saw the red flags, and yet I kept going because I didn't know what else to do at that point. And so I think that is one of the problems that we face in these kinds of cases too, is people get in deep enough that they think, well, what do I have to lose now? Because I've already sold my soul to this point.
Yeah, and they might think, who's going to believe me? I mean, I do believe Kevin Frankie did say, nobody who's in a cult says, I'm in a cult. You don't, you might realize it later, but you won't at first.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even people that spend a lifetime in cults, like you watch today, the people who were part of the Heaven's Gate cult, they still get teary-eyed thinking about their friends who committed suicide and actually accomplished this level of greatness that they didn't have the courage to accomplish or something. In the FLDS group, we see people who are leaving the cult or are thrown out by Warren Jeffs because of one reason or another, and yet they long to be back because we have to realize that there may be some good parts in there. The relationships, there might be a few people that you really grow to love, but all of a sudden you're stripped from them and you never get to see them again, and you see them carry this injury with them throughout the remainder of their life.
So it's so bizarre to me that they usually it's not always, because Warren Jeffs didn't go off grid, right? But everybody mostly they go off grid, and then they have these large properties, and like Jodi Hildebrandt living in that $5.3 million house. But the evil that they're inflicting on children. Luckily, it doesn't sound like there were animals there, but it would be children and animals. How is that kind or loving or anything good? How does one wake up every day as a cult leader? I'm trying to put myself in their shoes and be like, okay, today we continue with that. I mean, it's just sick.
Yeah, and to hear them say things like children are innately bad and we have to somehow exorcise this demon within them out of them is so foreign to the world that we all grew up in, where children are inherently tender and naive and good. And yeah, teenagers lie. That's when they move their lips, they probably are twisting the truth a little bit. But that's where a parent has to step in and do the ugly job of parenting and rudder your kids along and do that. And it's hard again because we want to sit back and judge, but I can't imagine anything ever saying that is justification to bind a child with duct tape and leave them in a basement, or to do some of the things that we hear these predators doing. But again, I believe that it goes back more to the psyche of the individual than the victim. While they might point to the victim and say, this is the reason why these behaviors are happening, it's really all about the predator.
It really is. The spineless, parasitic predator with nothing better to do than harm other people. And it's almost as if they're not able to deal, it seems like, with their own traumas, and now they're inflicting it and projecting on others. It's terrible. Goodness.
Yeah, and imagine having to constantly reaffirm yourself with the people that are trying to follow you, that you're on course and that they're thinking that keeps drawing them back. This goodness inside of us, a lifetime of being trained of how you really treat people, that keeps us in conflict. That you have to continue to keep them in check and keep them in the place you need them to be. You think about the old hierarchical form of needs, and the idea that you've got to satisfy certain kinds of things before self-actualization at the top of that pyramid becomes important. You've got to solve these problems down here before you say we're going to fix this one up here. But these people are often just, in my opinion, number one, untrained. They are trying to maintain a position of power and control, and they do that through emotional force, through coercive control, through physical force, and yet somehow they think that they are enlightened by doing it.
Yeah, and much better than everyone else, enlightened above all. Because imagine putting Jodi Hildebrandt, Ruby Franke, Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, all in one room. Warren G. Like, that would be interesting. Like, now, who's the most enlightened?
Well, yeah, I mean, what a great segue to talk about the Daybells, because isn't that exactly what happened? Two like-minded people, gas and a flame, came together and they became the Daybells.
Yes.
And the Daybells became this murderous couple that went about doing poor. And so you think, what would these people do together? That's what a cult is all of these like-minded people that find each other. And thankfully, with the internet, we can make it a lot easier on these cult leaders to get people who think just like they do. And it doesn't matter where you live, they're able to find each other. And that, to me, is just so astounding.
So how can one spot that? Like, imagine watching Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell meeting, at his little seminar, whatever, for the first time. Can we spot the red flags, and what can we do about it? And what if a family member is getting sucked into something that two or more people have created? What must one do?
I remember my mentor at the FBI teaching me that predators are really good at taking legitimate needs and wants and desires and illegitimizing them through these kinds of predatory acts. And so you think about it, all of us have a legitimate need to feel valued, to feel loved, to feel that somebody else thinks that I'm worth having around. That's a legitimate need. We all have a need for love and a good hug once in a while. But a predator isn't willing to go through that process, that legitimate thinking people go through, where you learn the bumps in the road and you figure out how to be a companion to someone, and you figure out how to give and not just take. A predator just says, no, I'm going to get that same need satisfied, but I'm going to do it through illegitimate means. And that illegitimate means in a cult is coercive control, whether it's physical or mind control or emotional, or the ignoring of someone when they do something that doesn't line up. Because you'll hear most people who are in a cult talk about the incredible love bombing that goes on. It's all during this legitimacy stage. And that love bombing gets us sucked in, and then we think, man, these people really think I'm something, and I feel so good when I'm there. Why wouldn't I want to be there? But then the moment they step off the beaten path that this cult has designed, then they're shunned emotionally from the rest of the cult. And during that process, they either have that awakening and say, holy cow, this isn't for me, and they leave, or they come in line. And just like a dutiful horse that's been broke, they give in and say, if you're going to pull the reins to the right, I'll turn to the right.
Oh man, that is so dangerous. Love bombing, yes. We talk a lot about coercive control here and domestic violence and things like that. So cults can go under that banner of coercive control, and love bombing is a red flag. That's definitely one. I wonder if, well, we know that Chad Daybell did that. Well, I don't know, actually. Who do you think was the love bomber? Do you think it was Lori or Chad?
Yes, that's kind of the interesting question, isn't it? Is who was the real aggressor in that thing? And you can kind of theorize that Lori may have identified Chad. She'd been through a number of husbands. She was she was trying to figure out how to get rid of Charles Vallow and how to move on from that relationship. She found something that somehow validated her. But was she using Chad? Heck, I don't know. I mean, you look at him, and I could see, some dumpy guy all of a sudden thinks, well, why is this girl who seems to be attractive to me, and I'm not saying me, by the way, but to him, that's flattering. And he thinks, man, I haven't had my heart patter like this for a long time. And he starts getting a little goofy. And then she starts feeding him, or he starts feeding her. I don't know. But the thing that is clear to me is that with the Vallow Daybell case, is that two wackadoodles came together in space and time. They agreed on an ideology. And rather than what happens in most cults where you say, hey, I'm the supreme leader and everybody else follows me, it became a we're in charge and we are this special group of people that came from on high with all these special dispensations, and we are the ones that are going to usher in the new world. And then you start seeing all these things, whether again with Lori Daybell, is it a touch of schizophrenia, is it narcissism, or is it just plain two evil people collaborating on how to control others? I don't know. But the result was they were pretty dang successful at what they did.
They were, and cost so many people their lives. I suppose Lori is a very dangerous one when we look at her background of how many people died around her. That, and her
Yeah, I mean,
brother, oh my word, the influence
I
she
would
had on
think
him
maybe
as well.
Chad Daybell's sitting in prison right now thinking, hey, maybe I was pretty lucky that I got arrested and put in prison the rest of my life, because if I were to follow the statistics, he may not have been around.
Yes, exactly. Do you think sometimes it's out of sheer boredom as well that people get like complacent in their lives and they feel bored, they want something exciting, and then, like those two wackadoodles meet each other? Now it's very exciting because not only do they feel seen and heard with all their crazy ideas, but they can also like spice up their life a little bit.
I worked for many years with this brilliant farmer, or well, he was a farmer as a boy. This brilliant investigator who, as a boy, was a farmer. And I remember sitting one night talking to him, and he said to me, "There's a reason God kept farmers working in the field all day long. It was so they didn't have the energy to go out and do all this other stuff." And you think about it, and I think there was a lot of wisdom in that. If people were working a little bit harder physically and coming home dead tired, maybe they wouldn't think of conquering the world and all their concubines.
Yeah. Conquering the whole world, the very special 144,000 that they've got there. My word. As I say, put them all in one room. Now who's winning?
Yeah, and that 144,000 always troubled me because those are pretty slim odds. I don't know. I think I would find a church that gave you a little better odds.
Right? Wow. So, oh my goodness. What else can I ask you? We have so many questions to ask you, but I hit a blank because I'm just like, what? I just can't believe that these things happen kind of in plain sight, but also not. It's very well disguised. They look friendly, while they're doing their thing. And then at the end of it, it's all like, what just happened there? What did we miss?
And isn't that the real secret to many of their successes? Because when you look at some of the cults that are out there with these really strange leaders that are, doing voodoo and everything else, the normal person's going to walk into that a little suspect from the beginning. But you get some plain Jane and some plain John that are saying, hey, we got something special going on. And I haven't figured out why people think that Chad Daybell was charismatic. I haven't figured out why people think that Warren Jeffs was charismatic. They are, I listen to him and I think, you got to be kidding me. Somebody thought that this guy was in charge and a direct connect to God. That seems pretty strange to me. And yet, when they mingle the belief system, whether it be scriptures or an ideology with their philosophies, people get sucked in.
Exactly. And it's really sad and really hard to recover from later. Even as adults, when they get sucked in, as you say, they can't just say, okay, well, I did something really dumb. It's kind of embarrassing even, which is also not good because then people don't talk about it, then they can't recover. There must be so many victims that have escaped and are trying to restart their lives. My goodness, worldwide. Actually, you gave a quote once. How many cults are operating worldwide at one time?
So I was on the Dr. Phil show one day, and Phil brought up the fact that statistically, they say there are about 6,000 cults operating at any given time. And those could be larger in number or smaller in number. And those are coercive cults. That's not the people who think Pringles potato chips are the best on the planet, which that could be a cult by the core definition of it. But these are the coercive cults that can hurt people.
6,000. Did you guys hear that? When I heard you say that on one of your shows, I'm like, what? 6,000. I mean, it doesn't sound like the biggest number if you think of the whole world, but it is a lot. It's a lot of little groups. Again, we should put them all in one, can't say room because it'll be a lot of people. Well, how many people go to CrimeCon? Put them all there. CultCon. Everybody, all the leaders in
There
one
you
room,
go.
fight it out. Okay. Yeah, maybe that'll sort it out. Oh man.
Yeah. Let's let God sort out who's the real prophet.
That'll be interesting. Also, I know you said you've had a lot of prison lasagna, right? You go and do interviews, talk to people. Have you ever talked to
Yes.
former cult leaders, and do they still believe in what they believed in? Because it seems like they do, like they hook, line, and sinker in their own belief system.
Yeah, and I wonder again how much of that is that part of them that has to say, I'm not going to admit that I was messed up or that I was duping people. I would rather be a martyr that God is allowing to sit in prison so the faith of my followers increases. And yeah, I mean, I know at one point Greg and I we traveled the United States doing a study for the Bureau of Justice where we were interviewing serial predators who had more than two victims, murder victims, fitting a specific kind of a category, and it was elderly women that was the preferential victim of these predators. And as we went and talked to them, and you had them re-describe their crimes, you could see them kind of vicariously rolling in the dirt and reliving the experience, just like you or I might do when somebody says, tell me about the time you won the Super Bowl, or that you were on the stage and you sang a song and everyone clapped for you. As we see these predators relive these experiences, then we start to understand how motivating it was for them emotionally and psychologically. And so with these cult leaders, as I've gone in, and just recently I spent some time again with a predator who believed that he and his brother were sent by God to kill a woman and her child, and then another woman and a man. And I sat down with him and I said, "You've been in prison 35 years." And I talked to him when he was first convicted, and we maintained a relationship over the years. Ate a lot of prison lasagna with this guy, and I said, "Do you still believe this today?" And he said, "Absolutely." And he said, "If I got out today and God told me to kill someone, I'd kill him." And I can attest that he believes that, because before I retired from law enforcement, I actually took him out of solitary confinement in the prison. I put him on an airplane and I flew him to Phoenix for a conference that I was speaking at. And there were about 1,000 police investigators from across the United States in this conference. And I wanted him to come in and talk about ideology and the victim selection process and his crimes in particular, which, I mean, he was a gruesome killer. You can look him up. His name's Dan Lafferty, and he, with his brother Ron, slit the throats of their sister-in-law and her little 14-month-old baby. And he was on the stand talking about this murder, and a sheriff down on the front row said, "Are you telling me that if God told you to kill somebody today, you'd do it again?" And he leaned forward and he was shackled and he was in his orange jumpsuit and he had his legs shackled, and we had him cuffed to the chair. And he leaned forward and he said, "Well, sir, if God told me to kill you right now and I could, I would." And that
Wow.
sheriff jumped up and everybody was like, "Settle down. So, let's get rid of all the emotion." But so you have to try to figure out how much is theatrics and how much is real. But in most cases, I believe that they really believe and would continue to do that. Now, I don't necessarily believe that of the number 2 or number 3 in an organization, and they to me are more frightening than the number 1.
Interesting. That the number 2 or number 3 are more frightening. Why? Because they don't fully believe it, or what? Because they're manipulative?
My experience has been that usually the number 2 is trying to prove to the leader. They have a testimony of the leader, and the leaders often take this chicken way out, in my opinion. And in the Lafferty case, Dan's brother Ron got the revelation that they should slit the throats of these 2 individuals. And he said, listen, Dan, I'm the voice of God, but you're really lucky because you're the arm of God. You're the one that gets to do the dirty work. And he was thrilled because it goes back to something you said at the very beginning when we started talking. And that was, it's a special dispensation. And these people believe that by aligning with this person, they're guaranteed a place in heaven, or they're guaranteed a lot of respect or something else. And so I'm always worried more about number 2 than number 1. Not the voice of whatever God is that they follow, but the arm of whoever that God is that they follow.
That's such a good point. Also, I don't want to miss these questions. Someone asked earlier, what are the chances of Jodi and Ruby signing some people up in prison, like operating, because they're in the same prison together.
Yeah,
Operating to recruit people now and share those visions now.
Yeah, every charismatic leader that I ever put in prison had a group of people who thought they were amazing in prison. So only makes good sense. The stripe is not going to change on the zebra. And so we have to recognize that if they have access to people and they spew their ideology, and they can convince people that they have some special dispensation, it sets them apart from others, which in a prison system is also a great way to stay a little safer when people think that you're a little different than just the rest.
Yes, I mean, Jodi Hildebrandt in one of her jail calls, I don't know who the Ryan guy is that she's talking to, but he's just like agreeing with her. But she just says, I think that after all this, when I get out, I'm going to have a very special story to tell. And it's like they make as if this is meant to be. This is now God's plan. That, like Laurie also said the same. This is all part of the plan. Like, what is that?
Yeah. And isn't that awesome? Because they, in their own wackiness, can somehow find that there's reason for this, and that I'm still this special soul. I'm not a predator. I'm not a criminal that got caught and put in jail. No, now I'm a martyr. And martyrs are pretty spooky in and of themselves. I mean, you have Warren Jeffs sitting in prison, and he comes up with this idea that says, none of my followers, this is 2010, none of my followers will have sex anymore. No more children in the community. And everybody says, okay, if the prophet says it, we're going to stop. Imagine the power, even sitting behind bars, that gives to him to do something like that. And then he sits in there and says, I'll decide who gets married. And so you have all kinds of kids that are wishing they could get married. They found someone, but they can't marry anybody because they have to wait for Warren Jeffs to decide who he thinks they should marry. And so these predators continue to have incredible power.
My goodness, I hope some of these people stumble on our episodes, your channel, my channel, as we talk about this, and just go, hello. Don't give Warren Jeffs that much power, right? What a little man sitting there dictating to everyone how they should live. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And, and I've seen a couple of comments roll through. Again, going back to this very thing I tried to talk about at the beginning, which is our natural tendency to say, this person was a believer in this faith tradition, so it must be the belief of that faith tradition, which is absolute hogwash. And again, I go back to that experience. Everyone that I talked to in the United States had the same feeling I had about, there are a lot of Latter-day Saints involved in crime in Utah, but if they were in Chicago, it was, there are a lot of Catholics involved in crime in Chicago, or there were a lot of Baptists down in Alabama. And we have to keep in mind that these faith traditions are the baseline, but a predator is a predator, and they're going to use whatever they can, and they're going to use the experiences they've had, which again, so I just really caution people that want to keep going there and blaming a faith tradition. That I think that's a short-sighted way to chase these kinds of cases.
Right, because if you look at predators in general, imagine how many, as we know in true crime, man, how many people are abusing children, inflicting the same or worse harm. It's just that people have an assumption that religions are supposed to be good and kind and nice. So what is going on there? And now that's the problem. But these predators are everywhere.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, if you want to pick a church, pick a good or an evil church, and say they're just an evil person or they're a good person, and they're using what they've learned, or they're using principles that are something that will appeal to the victim. And that's really all it's about, is gaining control of the victim so that they can act out whatever their predatory fantasies are or their impulses are. And you might find a person here or there who somehow may try to tie it back to the faith tradition. And I'm trying to be careful to not injure any faith tradition, but you may find people that say, no, this is just inherent. I mean, I've heard it spoken of about things that are more cultural than religious, in things that happen to people in different areas of the world that would be criminal in nature here and culturally accepted there. And we just have to kind of keep all that in mind as we look at that. And so one of the things I always taught police officers was quit talking about all the voodoo in this case and solve the crime. The element of the crime: was the person sexually assaulted? Was the person a person of influence in their life? What are the elements that are going to prove and put this person in prison? And then if later down the road you want to go down a pathway and say, hey, and they also believed in Diet Dr. Pepper, then bring it up during the sentencing phase. But it really has no place otherwise, in my opinion. Answer the elements of the crime.
That is so true. I wish then people that are stuck in these cults could have access to more education on just true crime, the nature of the crime. Like, just look at it without all of that fluff, right? Because like a lot of these cult leaders want access to children, like sexual access to children, and all your money and everything you have. They're going to take everything from you and your self-worth.
Yeah, and isn't that the truth? I mean, and it's all about transparency. It's about transparency in legitimized religion. It's about transparency in cults. And the thing that a cult leader does, the first thing they do once the love bombing has been successful, is they start a process called searching and separating. And they separate them from the safety net that person had throughout their life. No, you don't need to see your parents, or you don't need to go out on your own. You're going to go with another cult member because you need to be safe while you're out there. It has nothing to do with them being safe. It has everything to do with them controlling the behaviors, the exposure, and everything else. And I get so angry when I hear, just the other day, I was down in the polygamous community and somebody told me, yeah, I was able to get a phone, but it had to be baptized by the FLDS. I said, well, what do you mean it had to be baptized? And they said, they take away everything that gets me any access to the internet. So they remove all the capability for Wi-Fi and everything else on it. And I can only receive phone calls on it from my parents or whoever decides to do this. Well, that's the way you maintain control in a cult, is you cut people off from the ability to hear a different side of things where you can think, holy cow, I don't believe that.
That is so true. Like cutting them off from all worldly things, right? They really go that way. So isolate, so love bomb, and then start telling them special secret things that only you may know it. Don't tell them. And then they isolate them. And then, cut all internet, basically. Internet access, worldly movies, music, all that stuff. No outside influence. So dangerous.
Yeah. And, we do the same thing with our children. When they're young, we limit what their exposure is to things that will hurt them. But this is a lot different. And this isn't a loving parent that's helping a child mature and prepare for life and prepare for a world that's filled with all kinds of grungy things. This is a group of people that are saying, no, we're going to cut you off from anything that's going to expose the evil that's within.
Oh my goodness. It's unbelievable. I really enjoy these conversations with you because we learn so much more every single time. I'm sure we'll have many more. I really hope so. I'm not saying goodbye yet. I'm just like wanna pick your brain. And again, I just want to show all the Grizzlies your book, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. I believe you're out there mapping baby cemeteries. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know tomorrow you have a show about it.
Yeah, let me tell you about that. But before I do, I want to just say too that folks, if you buy Deceived, you're not putting money in my pocket. We've actually been rolling all of the proceeds from Deceived for a new children's advocacy center. That's a place where children can be forensically and physically examined if they've been sexually or physically abused, and then prepared for the court system. And in the Zion Society case that this book is written about, we had actually opened the second advocacy center in the United States back in 1991, and we called it the Children's Justice Center. And the Zion Society victims were the first people through the doors of that brand new center. So they had a baptism by fire in a way that has never hit the CJC since. But we broke ground about 7 weeks ago on a brand new building. We've been able to pay for the site surveys, and we've been pushing all of the proceeds to go toward video equipment and other kinds of things to help in that Children's Justice Center. So if you're donating and buying the book, just know that it's going to kids and not me. If you buy my other book about my great-great-grandmother's murder, then I'm taking every penny and I'm buying Dr. Pepper with it. But short of that, you're really
just
helping
the normal
out.
One. Or is your cult does it have the diet one?
Yeah, the Diet Dr. Pepper is the preferred.
Okay. That's the one.
Method.
Okay.
So let me just see if I can pop up a screen here. And yeah, if you would like, I would love to just talk about this for just a moment.
Yeah.
So tomorrow night, I'm going to release something that I've been working on for a long time. So as an investigator in the Attorney General's office, of course, dealing with polygamy for much of that time, I would go into the FLDS community, and there was a small cemetery in there that had little tiny headstones, many of which just were hand carved with some kind of a scratching instrument that said something like Baby Jeffs or Baby Jessup. No dates of birth, no dates of death. And one of the things that was so troubling to me as an investigator, and this is again back in the mid-90s to the 2000 era, and I was able to work in polygamy kinds of investigations through the new millennium, which was supposed to be the end of the world, and it didn't come. So Daybell's not the only one that blew it on picking the day of the end of the world. But it always bothered me that these babies were buried in there, and the word on the street was that there was about 250 babies buried there, and that they all had lived less than a few days before they were put in the ground. They never had birth certificates, and that really troubled me. And they never had death certificates, which would have warranted a death investigation. And they somehow skirted state law and got away with that. And it always troubled me. I never quit thinking about those children. And every time I would ask for a marker or a map or something to show where those babies were buried, I would get a response from the FLDS leaders or the city leaders that one didn't exist and it was none of my business. And because it was none of my business, I made it my business. And I decided I'm going to go down there, whether they like it or not, and I'm going to map out every little grave that I can find. And tomorrow night, I'm going to talk about it in detail. And I'd love to have anyone that wants to join come in and join. But what I've done is I've created a map. So I went out and I flew the cemetery with a drone.
Okay.
And I got really high-res imagery so that I could really still show things better than you'd ever see on a map. In fact, if you looked at a regular map, you get kind of this look when you get down to the ground level. And so the imagery that I flew if I can get over there fast enough. Here we go. I think I'm getting close. Is just really high resolution and so much nicer. And in that, once I had the imagery collected, then I walked through and I itemized every single grave in the cemetery. And I put it on this little map so that you can pick a name out and see where they're buried. But there are little tiny headstones like this particular headstone right here that simply says, if you can read it here, celestial baby.
Yes.
It just was always so terribly sad to me. Or over here to see these little tiny headstones that again were just carved out of stone and stuck in here. And so what I've done is I've taken and I found 215 babies in this graveyard, and I created this map, and I've made it possible for people hopefully to donate a little to help keep the upkeep on it. But what I'm hoping is that the members of the FLDS that have left the FLDS will come online and save a little video of themselves talking about that baby, who that child was, how long the child lived, and why that little tyke was so important to them. And hopefully, whether the government will ever do it or the polygamous community will ever acknowledge it, I wanted to acknowledge it and just say those little kids, they had a place in the world.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. So no one knows what happened to them. No one knows how old these children were. They're babies, though. You know that, right?
That's all we know, is that they were babies. Some you'll see that it was they'll put a date of birth and a date of death on the same day. Others you might see that it lived for a day or two. Many of the markers are just terribly rough looking little stones. Like this one says baby boy home, born on February 3rd, 2007. So probably died the same day. And tomorrow night when I talk about, I'm going to talk about some of the reasons behind why those babies were buried there. Some believe it had to do with Fumar's disease, which is a form of Down syndrome that is really problematic. Others believe that some of the children were deformed and just not wanted because of the deformities and allowed to die. And I'm going to just frankly say, I don't know what's true and what isn't, because there are no records. And to me, that is an absolute failure of government and a failure of a community to allow these little children to just disappear and never be seen again.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's incredible work. So let me show the Grizzlies quickly what's happening tomorrow on your channel. Okay, so I'm also going to make sure I share the link so they can. Okay, Mike's show tomorrow. What time is it tomorrow? 27
awesome.
hours.
7 p.m. Mountain Time.
Okay. Oh, that's like
So that's 9 o'clock Eastern Time. You'll be asleep, I hope.
If I'm there, you guys, Sunny Slaughter's going to tell me you go to bed. Mike's show tomorrow. Let me just put this in the chat for them. There we go. Wow. Okay. Sorry, you've taken your screen down. You didn't want to show anything else. Okay, we're very excited to see it there tomorrow and hear how you've been mapping all of this. That is wonderful work that you're doing as well. Wow.
Well, it'd be interesting because I might have a warrant put out on my head after this, because it's going to make a lot of FLDS people angry. But
oh dear.
Anger only suggests there's conflict in your heart, and maybe if there's conflict, they'll think it through.
We hope so. We hope so, and stay safe. Also, somebody commented, Laura, thank you for your comment. You said, it seems that people in the chat are confused between religion and cult. There's a difference, even though many cults come out of religions, but some of them are just born out of whatever, just something else. So it's important to know the difference. So what would you say to that? What's the difference between religion and a cult?
Yeah, so I think that I would like to just kind of go back to that core definition of what a destructive cult is. And that is because again, there could be cults like people that like Diet Dr. Pepper. We're in a little cult and it means something to us. But a coercive cult where usually there's one leader or maybe a few, but they are the end all from every decision that's made. They are the one that decides how the money's spent, who does what with who. That there's this usually charismatic leader, but a leader that everyone points to for everything, and that the things that are done in the cult are coercive in nature, like they take away people's rights, they take away people's choices, they take away people's opportunities, they control their lives in every aspect. Those are becoming destructive in nature, and that becomes the kind of cult that I worry about. I don't worry about the people that happen to like the Dallas Cowboys football team. And yet they're a cult. So we really want to separate it between destructive and non-destructive and coercive. And the biggest thing of all to me is that they are transparent, and cults are not transparent.
That is so true. It's entrapment and unfreedom. Laura Richards always says it's unfreedom from the Crime Analyst channel. Like they take away slowly but surely all your freedom and all your stuff, all your money.
Yeah.
Big financial gains. There's often financial gains as well. Sickening stuff like, whatever predatory fantasies they have, but then also your resources. So you can't get out, because that's another question. Why don't people, it's the same as a DV question that people ask. Maybe you have an answer. Why don't people just leave when they realize they're in a cult, or if they realize something's not right? Why don't they just leave?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge that moms and dads have and siblings have when they have a family member who goes into a cult. Because if they ever get the chance to talk to him, they spend all their time trying to tell this person all the things that are wrong with the cult. And that's not going to help. And so what I try to kind of recommend is that continue to be a lifeline if that individual ever chooses to take it. And don't be an I told you so kind of a person. That if someone finally says, holy cow, what have I been doing? And they want to come out and they want to grab that safety net, be a safety net of love, but be ready to help them, because it is going to be as long, if not longer, of a journey for them to come out than to go in. Because going in, they get sucked into the ideology and all the good feelings. But when they come out, they got a ton of baggage that they have to somehow process.
Yes. Have you ever seen victims escape and then go back because it's too scary out there,
Absolutely.
right? In the real world. I'm saying it like that because they're like, we're going out into the world. I've watched a lot of that Escaping Polygamy series, which I think was the Warren Jeffs cult, and girls being able to run out and escape, but then they get so scared once they're out. Some of them go back.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, the kids in the FLDS, they don't have any documentation of their birth or their existence. So to come out, they're not going to get a job because they have no documentation. They're not going to get a driver's license. They're going to enter a school system that is so far beyond their capability at that same age that they're going to be overwhelmed. And those kinds of things cause people to go back. And that's why I say that if you're going to be that safety net, it is a long drawn out process to help people go through that thing. I attended a dinner the other night with a group called Holding Out Hope that helps survivors of polygamy. And they say that the biggest challenge is helping people figure out how to go shopping at the store, how to pay for oil change, how to actually live life. And you think of all the experiences that we each have gotten through the course of our life when our parents got us a bank account and taught us how to put pennies in it and start saving it. These people have never had those opportunities. So they come out and they hit this incredible wall of life, and it's easy to go back. In the Zion Society, most of the women in that cult went to other cults when the leaders went to prison, because they would rather, it was their mindset, be told how to do everything and have somebody promise them they're going to make it to heaven than to put any gumption forward in making decisions for their own choices. And so some people are just predisposed to be followers and to be in those kinds of organizations. And I'll tell you, I hold little hope for people that are like that of ever surviving.
Shame. That's terrible. Oh my goodness. So, but people, that's a good lesson though. People mustn't underestimate how how little they know about the basics of life on the outside. It would be helpful to just, if someone says, "How do you do this?" not be like, "How do you not know that?"
Yeah.
To help them because they really have not experienced that.
Yeah,
Right?
it's just absolutely terrible. I was with a young man the other night, seated at my table at the polygamy dinner, and he said that he and 34 of his brothers and sisters lived with his father and 4 wives in a double wide trailer. Imagine living in a double wide trailer with 39 people.
Oh my word. No, 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 no. That is quite something. Oh my goodness. Very sad.
Yeah.
So I would want to show them your channel one more time. If you guys want to go subscribe to
Oh, you
Profiling
are
Evil,
so kind. Thank you.
you're going to have lots of bear emojis in your chat. The Grizzlies have arrived,
I love
especially
it.
tomorrow. You're going to see us all here. See, Nana Banana's already
There's
there.
one that I'm not expecting because she better be sleeping.
Yeah. Oh dear. I think it's me, you guys. I think it's me. I'm not allowed in.
Yeah, you'll have to watch the replay.
Or I'll be lurking and you'll never know, you guys.
There you go.
And then here's the book. Remember, all proceeds go towards the Justice Center that you're building for children.
Yes.
Yes.
You want to see a picture of
Okay.
the Justice Center?
Yes, please. Show us that.
Yeah, let me pop this up and show you.
Crime Spy says, I subbed. Okay, very nice, you guys. So I know where you'll all be tomorrow. Sorry, you also sent me a picture
Okay.
before, but you have better pictures, better quality, I think, than what I have now. So yes, show us.
All right, let's see here. There we go. This is the new Children's Justice Center. It broke ground
let's
a
see.
few days ago. Well, 7 weeks ago. And this is the facility that we're helping
Wow.
donate toward to build for the kids.
Okay, and silly question. Like, okay, how does the people that you're trying to help, the children, who brings them there?
They're brought by law enforcement and children's advocacy workers. So the Division of Child and Family Services, when they're called to a scene and they pick up a child who's been sexually abused in a home or physically abused, they take them into protective custody. And one of the first things that happens is they need to be physically and forensically examined. So in the old days, when we did the Zion Society case, we had just barely opened the doors to this place. And but 2 weeks before the Zion Society case, children were being interviewed in the same smoke-filled police departments that criminals were being interviewed in, and it was just so intimidating for children and witnesses. And people would see some families' car parked down at the police station and say, "Why were you down at the police station?" And that was the whole purpose behind the Children's Justice Center, is building a center that was away from everything else, where you could bring the children in and no longer have police officers interview them, but have forensic psychologists do the forensic examination, have doctors doing the physical examination. And the idea is that they come in one door and go through this process in preparation for court, and then they go out another door, hopefully a little healthier than they came in.
Oh, that is so nice. Pepper asks, love it, Mike. Where is this?
It's in northern Utah, in the city of Ogden. There are 23 in the state of Utah now. We actually, when I was in the county attorney's office, and we built this center that the Zion Society kids went to, it was the second one in the United States. So it was really cutting edge, and it's been incredible to see how this concept has caught on across the United States and frankly around the world now, where we actually treat child victims like children instead of bringing them into such a tough environment.
That is so nice, and definitely will be much more helpful. It actually sounds even more traumatizing to be checked and interviewed like they were before.
Yeah, imagine how frightening to have somebody in a uniform that they've been told to distrust, especially when you're dealing with cults.
Oh, yes.
In the Zion Society case, you'll learn how they used anatomically correct dolls to prevent the children from ever testifying or touching one of those dolls if they were ever interviewed. They told them they were the devil's dolls. And I actually have a chapter called The Devil's Dolls that explains the coercive mind control that the children went through using anatomically correct dolls that are used in the Justice Center to help children point out the kinds of touching that they endured or other things. It's pretty incredible what these little tykes go through.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
And people get mad at me because I call them tykes. So don't get mad at me. They're beautiful children, but they're little tykes.
Don't get mad at Mike, you guys. So I know that you usually go to CrimeCon, right? Are you going to be there this year?
Yes, I think I'm going to be doing a presentation or two. They've asked me to go on to Creators Row, so I'm going to go and sit there. And are you going to be there?
No, I'm a little less social than you. I'll be lurking.
If anybody that wants to sign up for CrimeCon, if you use Profiling Evil in your discount code area, then you'll get a discount on the registration. And yeah, we worked out a couple of deals, and CrimeCon. I'm excited. I'll be doing probably Court TV again there, and a few other things. So it'll be
Nice.
it'll be interesting. And we're in Nashville, where you get barbecues. So how do you go wrong?
CrimeCon in Nashville. So if anyone is going, then look out for Mike and go say, "Hi, I'm a Grizzly."
Please do. And we'll send pictures back to the boss here and make sure that you're posted online.
Yes, boss, not cult leader. Just to clarify, you guys.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes. Yes, and make sure if you do go, you guys, please send pictures, even post them on X and then tag me, tag Mike. It'll be great.
That would be fun.
So your discount code is Profiling Evil, right? Profiling Evil.
Correct.
Discount code.
Yeah.
Okay, they can just type that in all small letters.
I don't think it matters. Yeah.
Okay. So there you go. Get a discount code and everything. Well, as always, I could talk all day to you. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your knowledge. It's really comforting, actually, because we've been so in that rabbit hole of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, and then Chad Daybell's trials coming up, and it just starts feeling quite icky. So it's been very nice.
Hey, we're going to watch Daybell, though. That'll be kind of cool, won't it? Thankfully, we're going to be able to see inside the courtroom on this one.
Right.
And I'll probably go spend a couple of days there. So
I can understand now in hindsight why they didn't allow cameras for Lori, because she would be just smiling all day long for the cameras. So if he doesn't do that, but yeah, at least that one will be able to be watched. But it's just been so dark and icky. So hearing about the Children's Justice Center and the amazing work you do in your book, thank you so much. You make us all feel a lot lighter and brighter and happier. So thank you. And that there's hope for everyone, that even the kids affected that we just read about, there's hope for them.
Yeah. And, when this thing has its grand opening and they cut the ribbon, we're going to have a bunch of the survivors of the Zion Society there to meet with the press. So it'll be really a special day.
Wow. When is that?
Well, the contractor said that it would be done by October or November of this year, and that they've put a full court press on it. I've never seen a contractor end on time, so I have no idea.
I was going to say, oh dear, the contractor said, oh no, add on a year.
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever it is, please share some pictures, or maybe on X or your community tab. I'm sure all the Grizzlies would love to see.
We'll do it, and we'll actually get back. In fact, maybe on that day, depending on the time, it's still daylight hours for you. We'll maybe go live for a few minutes and just say we're here, and
yeah, that would be nice.
Bring some of the girls on, the women on, to talk to you.
Right. Quickly, before we go, I want to just see if I can redirect, teleport, as we say here, to your channel, if I could. Wait for it. Yes. Okay, now I can. Grizzlies, you're going to get teleported to Mike's show tomorrow. And if I'm there, I'll be lurking because I should be asleep. But I'll watch the replay because it's healthier as well. I will be doing that. That is this one. That is tomorrow. It's now in 27 hours for me. Yeah, it starts at 2 a.m. That's not too bad.
It'll be short for those that are coming. I'm hoping that maybe 30 minutes or so, but just and then I'm going to release the map and you can explore it on your own.
We love map time over here, so we're looking forward to that, and it's for a great cause. So
Well,
thank you so
thank
much for spending time with us. I really appreciate it. I know we went over time. We always do, you guys. We plan on maybe an hour and a half, but here we are. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you back again soon.
Thank you. It's always an honor to be with you. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you, Grizzlies, and thank you, mods. And I'll see you all again soon. If you guys didn't see me read the whole freaking journal, go check it out. It's in my video section. Anything else for them?
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.